All right, well, let's go ahead and kick it off. It is 4 o'clock. So I would like to express a great amount of thanks to all of you for joining us this week. Many of you presented, many of you volunteered or were voluntold to be part of our sessions. And so I am just grateful for all of you. If we haven't met before, I'm Jewel Alderson-Clark. I am the Integrated Curriculum Coordinator for the San Diego County Office of Education. And we are strong believers in ensuring all of our students have a future without boundaries. And this conference was designed to help break those boundaries, to really be thoughtful about the disruption that has happened over the last year and a half, and think about what kinds of innovations that we can put into place to change what education looks like, to ensure that the work we're doing to support our students not only supports them now, but also for a changing innovation economy, ensuring our students have opportunities for social mobility, for economic mobility, and really to find something that they're passionate about that they can do with the rest of their lives. I am excited today to introduce you to, if you haven't met him yet, our Deputy Superintendent of Innovation, Dr. Tony Smith. Dr. Smith joins us. He joined us in, I believe, June, and has an incredible past of education work, being the State Superintendent of Illinois, doing a lot of work in superintendent positions in California, up in San Francisco as a deputy soup around innovation and equity, as well as in Oakland as the superintendent there. And so we are excited to see him on our team and the impact that he brings to us. And now I'm going to hand the mic over to Tony to share some of his thoughts as he brings us to a close for this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Jewel. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And before I get started, I'll just a deep recognition for the work and the appreciation for the content development, the workshops that folks led, the time it takes to do that, to prepare to be a good and caring steward of other adults learning. Really appreciate that. And attendees, people who chose to spend your time in community doing this work, really appreciate you. And then Jewel, College and Career Readiness team, it takes time, energy, and effort, and a lot of iterations to create and curate this kind of content and put together something as thoughtful and coherent as is what's here and what's been produced. So I just want to appreciate everybody out of the gate and really recognize the amount of energy it takes to do this. So I'm going to talk for like 15 minutes. It's a group of a size that I'd like to get into a little dialogue, maybe 15 minutes of some overview and really kind of digging into some of the ideas about this moment and disruption and innovation. And then to the degree that people are interested, have some conversation about what those ideas and activities might look like as we reshape systems for deeper belonging and more agency for our young people. And in particular, kids who have been most harmed by the systems as they're currently built. And I think that's kind of where I'll start, which is the time that you've taken and the different workshops that were here really did take different angles on this idea of meeting young people where they are and preparing them for rich and full lives and futures that they can both civically and economically take care of themselves and their families and their community. And that to me is really at the heart of this notion of preparing young people for healthy futures, that this is a world where, you know, we're learning everywhere all the time. And I think the idea that we center on the assets and wisdom and possibility of youth, rather than what they don't have, what they're not, what they're lacking, that's where I would encourage us to stay focused. And I think the thing that really strikes me in particular in this space, this college and career, like the idea of really connecting deeply with young people around things that matter to them, it's pretty simple in some ways and hyper complex in the system as it is, which is, you know, what's a young person interested in? And are we creating the conditions, A, to know that well and authentically? Have we created conditions where, the experiences they have deepen their skills to do things that they care about? And beyond that, do they have relationships and networks that build social capital? That they have the kind of capital, cultural, social, economic capital, that they can have increased agency to take responsibility for things they're interested in and lead in their communities, and they have enough skill to do that. Like, that is, to me, a theme that was kind of woven in different ways through each of the sessions, whether it's specific to gender and resilience, whether it was specific to kind of eliminating trafficking. There are all these different approaches to paying attention to the margins, which to me benefits everybody. If we're finding ways to connect, pay attention to, and nurture kids who have been most pushed out, we can transform the system. And when I think about innovation, to me, it's about the elimination of bias and the creation of opportunity. And that is, whether we're talking about something like an app like Uber, many communities of color who, expressed that they used to be passed by with taxis can get rides. And some of the reports, like this equity move that Uber is and the Uberification of the app world, like it both eliminated bias and created opportunity in ways that other people hadn't imagined. Like these are things that we need to be considering. And where is bias baked in? How do we go purposefully to eliminate it? But also when we're creating new things, paying attention to who are the folks who might most be harmed by this new idea, and are we talking to them? So this notion of being in relationship and really designing with people is to me also part of this innovation from disruption. When things are disruptive, then sometimes we retreat to things we're most comfortable in. And if we're not in relationship with other, we tend to get the data, selection bias and confirmation bias. The data that we listen to and seek confirms what we already know. And so in moments of disruption, the more convinced somebody is, the more concerned I get. It's like, okay, so you know that from where you're situated, how and in what ways are you in relationship with others who are different from you and may think different about this? And that's how we get to durable solutions. This idea of, extraordinary need in the labor market right now. And like we've had an education system in this country for a long time. Labor shortage, COVID, sure, disruption. But our lack of readiness and preparation to fill those positions, predated COVID. And it goes back to this idea of, I think, a value, a power dynamic and relationship, not deeply valuing the learning and wisdom and brilliance of young people and holding them to, in many ways, an artificial standard of performance that doesn't align to the world of work and is certainly not aligned to passion, interest, and capacity of young people. So this shift of the system, this moment that we're in to really kind of grab onto a deeper set of connectivity, that is the moment. So there was a wonderful book in 2000 called It Takes a City by Paul Hill. And he was talking about education reform, and everybody has to start connecting different. And it's not just one institution, but that was still a fairly bureaucratic approach. I think the transition now is much more conceptually, it takes an ecosystem, right? And there's some really brilliant research coming out. And these are things we know, like just a young person's experience from when they wake up to when they go to sleep, and they interface with adults across multiple systems and multiple points of intersection. Like that's either a positive or a negative. All those interactions add up. And if we're only thinking about how we're interfacing in a classroom, we do so at our own risk, I think. Learning is happening everywhere all the time. And there are youth development folks, there are educators, there are people in business and industry, public, private, philanthropic. We have to create an ecology of care, of concern, and deep passion about young people being agents of their future. And that requires this radical notion that adults listen to kids, that we actually take seriously that when young people say they're interested in something, or they're concerned about something and facing a problem or an issue, that we don't start by saying, well, you don't know yet about this, and well, wait, in a few weeks you'll know, or next year you'll get to it. What if we actually started from the place of honoring what young people say they care about and they're interested in, and then we set about finding ways to deepen that interest, give them opportunities, we build their skills and build a network around them that helps them have a trajectory in that area of interest, right? If we design from young person's interest rather than from program, things get very different. And to me, so much of what you covered in the different sessions and produced in this entire event, really kind of, that's the spirit that I could discern. Now, I wasn't in the sessions, but that's what I just, from the different, reading the different sections and descriptions, and moving to this sense of an asset base. Like, young people bring things to the table, and how we nurture that, to me, is coming out of this disruption. There's been a pretty strong narrative about what kids lost or didn't do. And I think we're building that narrative, again, to our own demise. If we keep this idea that young people haven't learned valuable lessons, don't have new and different insight as a result of where they're situated during this pandemic, and we don't start from asking questions, we start from telling them what they're not, kids aren't going to come back. I mean, already there's a significant press on systems dropping average daily attendance, dropping numbers. The disruption is here. How we respond and what we think about in terms of healthy community, I think that's the answer, not how we fix attendance, not how we get kids back in the seat, but how we actually meet kids, the learning, the opportunity, and what our communities need to really be vibrant and healthy. I think that for me is rooted pretty deeply in youth development. Like, getting in relationship is a big part of this whole thing. And kids know. I mean, if you spent time with young people, very sophisticated BS detectors, right? Like, they know. And Herb Cole used to talk about all the time, I don't care what you know until I know you care. And so, to me, relationships. And it seems to me that that's still an area of distress in a lot of our schools, that people think, I teach my content, I don't teach kids. Where in the space of actually building career and technical aspiration, finding interest, like, we can connect much more deeply and build from young person's interest. And to me, young people want to know, do you care about me, right? I don't care what you know until I know you care. They want us deeply to challenge their growth. When we don't challenge kids, we do them an extraordinary disservice. And I would argue that that's one of the deepest, most significant, damaging impacts of racism in this country, that it has established basically cataracts, that we can't see brilliance, particularly in the populations that we have most harmed and most marginalized over time, because the narrative is what they're not what they are. And so to actually see young people and their interest and passion and demand excellence. I don't mean like kind of, well, you could be great, but to demand, to challenge their growth. The kids want that. They crave it. We as human beings want to be expected much of. Like, that demonstrates love and care, right? So challenge growth and then provide support. So you don't just kick somebody's ass. You don't just demand them to be great and then walk away. You provide support. You help them navigate. You help them, you advocate, you set appropriate boundaries, you do the work to challenge them, right? But that, again, is something that people get really nervous about when either they don't have the same lived experience, they tell a whole story or narrative about the kid, rather than getting in relationship with a young person and getting curious, right? So if you get curious, and then you do this next radical thing, which is maybe you share some power. Maybe you say, what would you do? Maybe you say, could we work on that together? I'm not familiar with that. Like this idea of sharing power and shifting and believing in young people, right? I mean, again, you start feeling like that person who has a lot more power than me actually is saying, you know, it'd be interesting. Could you lead this? Could you work with me on this? Game changer, right? And then as more experienced adults, particularly in this field, like if you see somebody with interest, they're building their skills, like, and you say, you know what, there's somebody I met at this corporation. This is where I would push on all of us as adults to keep expanding our networks. And when we go to workshops, to not just think, what can I get out of this? What's here that I could connect young people that I have the privilege to serve? What's here that I could get for them, right? I watch too many people go to conferences. They kind of do the thing, like, oh, I do that. That's interesting. And then I'm talking about, you got to be voracious for your children, for the young people that we serve, so we can expand their possibilities. Like, if you're not bringing that fire, you shouldn't be there. I mean, I know that sounds harsh, but young people need us to be great for them. And we can spend a lot of time talking about what's not right, but we're already there to be having that conversation, right? So this idea of justice to me is being ready and capable of doing my work. And I have a lot of stuff, I tell myself all these stories about where I do belong, don't belong. I've got to do that work in service of the kids I've had the opportunity to serve. And now as we engage together, as we take this on, right? I want to say something that's maybe even pushes the boundaries a little further, which, you know, a lot of people talk about educational reform, transformation. You know, Buckminster Fuller used to talk about new forming. Like, I don't have any idea what it will look like when we're actually creating the conditions for each person, each young person, to be well known, well cared for, and well prepared. I have no idea what that looks like, but I know in my heart that that is what we must do, right? So the new forming requires new forms of relationship, new forms of knowing, requires us to really challenge our own bias, to be in deep enough relationship to get feedback, to be a different person in this work. Like, and to know different and to hear different. And some folks on this have heard me talk about this before, but Daniel Kahneman talks about human beings, our brains, literally, every single brain, all of us on this call, like every single one of us has blind spots that we literally can't see, like just because of our own, how we've grown up, the wiring, that being in relationship with the other who can help me see my blind spots actually helps me become more fully human. Like, equity isn't just some ethereal other idea. The more I'm in relationship with other, I get more benefit because I have a richer cognition, richer sense, more full sense of myself, that then I can be different and better and more transformative in the world. So new forming isn't just some new idea, structure thing, new innovation. It's actually new forming of neural pathways, interpersonal neurobiology, being different in relationship with each other so that we can prepare young people to have agency and capacity in the world, to have their own story, to be the hero of their own story, not just barely making it, right? And not making it in a system that wasn't built for them, but actually navigating and authoring a story in which they are successful and whole, healthy, and well, right? So to me, all of what you've been doing is just so dynamic and exciting. And I just have such deep respect for the work that you're doing and appreciate these kinds of spaces. But, you know, we've got to figure out how to do universal design in ways that it's not a bell curve. Like, if your paradigm is a bell curve, then, and you talk about equity, you still are against this fundamental assumption that some can and some can't, right? So brains change and grow. They do. It's just fact. Like, we change and grow over time. Oh, you know, watch a PET scan. Like, we will be different over time. We can know and do things better and different. We have to believe in each other to do that. And these kinds of spaces to get in different kinds of relationships, to share, learn, think together, and disrupt systems that were, but not disrupt them by saying, oh, this kid needs to do X different. We need to understand that the system itself, right? So the whole curb cut thing, like, so that, you know, people in wheelchairs could get across and navigate streets more safely. The idea wasn't then, hey, do more gadgets on the chairs to be able to climb up onto the sidewalk. It was, this structure is actually making it harder for us to be safe, right? That system, once you change the system, it was better for everybody. But we do it so often that we say, this kid isn't right, this kid is far behind, this kid isn't smart enough. We don't say, how smart is this kid? We say, how is this kid smart in this new way of thinking? Like, if we want to actually get into new forming, we would start being much more intentional about how is this kid smart? What are they interested in? How are we building their skills to do it? And where is their social network? And how are we fortifying it for justice, for their own well-being? To me, that's CTE. That's where we need to go. Create opportunities that are dynamic, individualized, but collectivized in the sense of community. And that's where I think social justice resides. And it's in doing, and it's in economics, it's in like civic capacity to talk about my work and think about it, and what's the greatest problem that we're facing, and go solve it. That's to me what you've been about in these pieces, and putting it together, and just the charge to go out and really find ways to connect with young people and find more ways to help them shape the world that they want to live in, and really, you know, dismantle the bias that exists, create more opportunity, and get to a community that's thriving. Like, healthy communities, that benefits all of us. And more kids doing more of what they love and contributing to our communities is just good for all of us. And I think you've set the stage, you've done great work for the last few days. And so I really appreciate that. And then just wanted to open some space for some dialogue. If, you know, if you agree with what I've said, if there's something that like sparks something, or you disagree, would love to be in conversation with you about it, maybe for the next 10 or 15 minutes.
So that opens the floor to anyone here who might want to reflect on something today. I think, you know, some of the things that I heard Tony talk about were really around, you know, we spend a lot of time as adults in these spaces, but how do we put students, give them those challenges, make them agents of their own future, acknowledge their assets. So I'm curious if anyone saw those in our sessions today, or have seen, you know, in this last year and a half of disruption, something that clicked for you or changed your practice to kind of address these things. And you can actually unmute or raise your hand or add it in the chat.
Or chat, whatever.
Erica?
I'll say hi. So yeah, what really resonated with me was the how the kids do want that connection. They want you to ask them about their, you know, how they're feeling their day. So right now our district is really big on the social emotional learning, which I was doing before, but now I think it's kind of gotten a little more heightened in my classes. So I do a daily check-in, and I do what they call a pear deck check-in of every day. It's Monday. How was your weekend? What are you doing? How are you feeling today? And it's really like taken off, because my students, if there's a day that I skip it, they're like, wait, we're not doing our check-in today? We're like, and these kids will tell me full on like stories. So it's a little section that I get to read. So I go through all of them. So if I have 15 responses, I read each one out loud in the class, and it's anonymous. So these kids, I kind of feel like there's a sense of family, you know, they talk about their relationships, they talk about home, they talk about you know, there's this guy that I'm talking to that I like, it's a crush, or what should I do? And my students get involved, like leave him or don't talk to him, or stuff at home, like family, like, oh, my one today was like, oh, I'm having a really hard time at home, my parents are getting divorced. And all my other kids were like, oh, we're so sorry to hear that, you know, if you need a hug, you know, we're here. So I totally love that. And I feel like it creates a stronger bond with my kids, almost like a family environment. and it's totally off the curriculum. We're supposed to stay on task and do all this stuff, but I take that 5-10 minutes at most at the beginning of class. It's a 2-hour class, so I feel I can spare 10 minutes to just connect with the kids, and I feel like it builds a better relationship. So if they are failing or not doing something, I'm like, hey, come here, like, what's going on? Oh, I'm the one that posted this, stuff going on. So I feel like they're a lot more responsive when it comes to setting that bar.
If you
So
look
that
at
really,
SEL frameworks, you are not outside of what you should be doing with your students. I did a presentation on SEL and CTE earlier this year, and really looking at the standards for career ready practice and where they overlap with the Castle framework for social emotional learning. And so the work we do to connect our students to their future in a bigger picture is a huge component of SEL. So do not hesitate to take that time to build your students and build their understanding of themselves and their future.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's really great. I love it. And I love the connection. And it also gives me an opportunity to share, like, they asked me like, oh, Miss, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, went here, went there. And it's funny, like, they really want to know about you and be involved. So, I mean, Pear Deck has been like a godsend for me because it's anonymous and the kids are more open to respond and give answers. So I use it even in my lectures. I use it for checking for understanding. I use it for assessments. So it's just been one of the best apps so far that I have used.
That's brilliant, Erica. I appreciate that. The couple of things that come up for me, the connection. So the depth of connection, and then, again, back to some brain research, but in a functional MRI, like if you pay attention to a brain, an MRI, like real time, like when somebody that we know asks us a question, more of our brain tries to answer that question. So
Yeah.
when we have a deep sense of connection and community, we're actually cognitively more capable. So the time you're spending to nurture the condition, the interpersonal work creates more neural capacity, literally. And also, it I would argue, begins to interrupt this notion that we are not connected. That, there's this kind of fierce individualism, and that story is BS. Like, none of us are here because just I got here. Like, I am here because of the great care and grace of many others, right? And we don't have a great history of creating a shared narrative like that. And then, if we actually believed, and Father Boyle talks about this, if we actually believed that we belonged to one another, we would do far less harm to each other. So anyway, I really appreciate that work you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate what you hit a topic on. It's a really it does really hit home. I do have to really be aware of. I think I would say speak for myself, but I do have those biases, and I really have to be, I think, more aware of that. I guess we all do sometimes, but just it's really helped me to be more aware of what kids are going through and what they're dealing with, not only at school, but in relationships at home. And that does affect the outcome of, their learning capabilities.
For sure. Thank you. Anybody else?
What struck me is, I hadn't heard this before, maybe most of you had, but when you said, I don't care what you know till I know you care, I think that says a whole lot about the kids that we work with.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think the idea of creating that relationship and then attaching it to their passion and helping them to direct their passion, what is it they're interested in? What is it they want to do? Just speaks volumes for them wanting to be a part and a partner with you in guiding, their future. And I think when they feel that they're being valued in that way, it's amazing.
Yeah. And I'm Sherry, I'm just betting you felt that. Like when a teacher one time said, so I think about this room as a safe harbor and a launching pad, right? And that to have that awareness and sensibility as the teacher to think, okay, how is this a safe harbor? Like we come in and learning is like, by definition, like you didn't know it before, it's disequilibrium. So the safer we feel, the more risk we can take. And then the launching pad piece, like not everybody's going to the same place. So a launching pad, it has to be differentiated. I was just, but anyway, I could riff on that, but I love what you just said.
So I can add something as well. When you were talking about a couple things, the dropout rates and just the low attendance, I remember being at a conference with a guest speaker who was saying that students might not drop out till 10th grade, but they kind of make the decision if they buy into school by 8th grade. And so to me, starting this younger, really tapping into the interest, but I think beyond interest also is strengths, because when I work with students and we're working on resumes, or I feel they really struggle to identify what they're good at. And when you don't feel good, like I am good at this and I'm good at that, and you kind of are finding I'm not really good at math, or I don't really write that well, then you really focus on what you're not good at, because you don't really feel inside that I have these strengths and I know I'm good at these things. And so I have actually had a hard time finding really good strengths assessments for students. There's like strengths cards that say different, but a really good strengths assessment that's free to utilize. And so that's something I would really like to see, because I think you have to feel good about who you are really to start to the next point, you know, to as the launch pad from there.
Yes, totally. And I mean, and the research to back up your point is just so significant that you tend, if you're good at something, you can use it to get good at other things. But if you're constantly told what you're not good at, even if you're good at something, your capacity to do the thing you're good at also starts to diminish. Matt Bloomstead, who's the state superintendent in Nebraska, says we've built an extraordinary assessment system to tell our kids what they're not. And that so deeply resonates with me. So yeah, I think, so PERTS has an engagement tool, PERTS. It's and I'm so sorry I can't remember the name, but it's actually a really interesting way to get at what you're raising. I'll look it up. But I think that's exactly it. It uses student voice, uses their interest, uses what they know that they're good at, and talks about places that fortify them. And then it's a way for teachers to get feedback from young people that helps them connect to their strengths. I'm so sorry, I can't remember. It's PERTS. I know the organization. I don't know the name.
Okay. And when I was teaching middle school, I found sometimes I loved when a parent would kind of advocate. I'd have a student in my elective class, and that was the one class they felt they were good at, like they actually did well. And sometimes they would want to pull the student to take I'm losing the word, but where they like can I think of it? To kind of like focus on like their math skills so that they would be pulled from the class. And I've had it where the student was like, no, this is the one place that I actually thrive in, that I feel like I do well in. And I've had it then where parents will advocate and say, no, we want to keep them in the class remediate. Anyway, so yeah, so I think that kind of goes along with that, but we want to focus on what students are good at, and a lot of times that's in the CTE classes. So,
and that's just it, right? So that the passion around and the interest match between people who have a passion about an industry or an avenue and are excited to see young people starting to express it too. They again, the kinds of relationships that build. And I do think this idea of it takes an ecosystem. Like there are all kinds of educators, youth development workers, like across an array. And we just have to be much better and less, turf-based and start being learner-based, right? The more learner-centered and thoughtful we can be about opportunities for young people and make that our agenda, I would say that's where justice resides, and to kind of build on those assets, as you were saying.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for everybody throwing stuff. This is, again, like, it takes a bunch of us, and everybody has different insights and resources to draw on. And that's the benefit of a community. So, this is all going to be collected, right, Jewel?
Yes, I will save the chat and try to incorporate that. I know Zoom doesn't necessarily include that in the video, but we will work to do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
If you are getting professional development credit for being at the conference, this is just take a quick screenshot of this slide so that you can have that proof for your district if that applies to you.
And so just as we kind of wrap up here, I want to give one plug for this idea called community schools, and the idea that the place called school needs to really be a place of integrating and connecting the learning that kids are doing everywhere all the time. And really the sacred role of teacher is to help young people know what they're interested in, build those skills, and have a network and community, and to be able to become critical thinkers and create the healthy communities that we all need. I think community schools are a way to do it. Expanded learning, integrated student supports, the idea of deep partnerships that really do respect the local wisdom and insight of parents, families, and community, and that collaborative leadership exists. So in my mind, a community school is like the structural extension of positive youth development, and done well and done thoughtfully, it's a place that's much more vibrant, that it's not about institutionalizing the notion of schooling. It's about really opening up and becoming curious about what learning can be. And I think that this kind of really productive, hands-on, generative sense of making and CTE is essential and part of what a healthy community is striving for all of its kids, that they, they can make meaning in the world. They can be makers of their own destiny. Anyway, so I deeply appreciate the time that you've spent, and I really thank you, Jewel, for inviting me to kind of close this out.
Thank you so much, Tony. I think that it was such a unique opportunity as we all kind of came together and could process and think about our next steps. And so whether you talked about it or not, I hope that the learning you had this week, and also the learning just as you look back over the last year and a half of disruption, what are your commitments going forward? What are the things that you are going to do to make learning different, to put your students at the center, to really think about those biases that are changing the way our students learn, and how we can shift that for our programs, for our students, for our CTE, or any program that you support. So again, we thank you all for joining us for the Go Virtual Career Pathways Conference of 2021. It has been a fantastic week. We will be archiving nearly every session. The timeline for that is TBA, but you will be notified once we have everything posted and up to ADA compliance to ensure folks can access the content ongoing. And so with that, we close this out. We thank you all for your time and for the amazing work you do to ensure our students have that future without boundaries. Thank you.